people of the internet. We are Terranaut Recordings. My name is Sean.
And I am Nick. So we're Terranaut Recordings. We're a Brooklyn-based music production duo. Basically, we help get your songs from demo to stream ready. We help you with the recording of instruments, the mixing and mastering. We play acoustic instruments. So yeah, if you want to work with us, check out the link in bio or the description, terranautrecordings.com. Or leave a comment, send us an email, anything. All the links are down there. But anyway, let's jump in. Today we're going to be talking about 5 production tips for songwriters. So the first tip is to turn off all your track presets, and this is especially for Logic users. So one time I got a track to mix and they wanted to clean up the audio and stuff like that. All I did was literally just turn off all the plugins on every single track. And like, I think I used 1 or 2 EQ plugins, and then I sent it back and they were like, great, thank you. So one that takes up a bunch of CPU power. Like, you have all these plugins, and if you do this for like 10 tracks, you're using like 60 plugins that aren't doing much. And sometimes it's like muddying the sound, and you're not really doing anything. It's just kind of a waste of CPU power. So that's one way to very easily clean up your tracks. And like, honestly, get the sound that you're hearing when you're first recording it. You know, it's my big belief that you should try to get the sounds as soon as they go in. Like, don't edit it later. Like, get the sounds as good as possible.
Right, because you can only do so much in post.
Yeah, you can only do so much, and it's better to just get the sound going in so you know what it sounds like in context rather than like searching for it. And there's also more time spent, and like you the more time spent looking at the macro things, the more you lose the micro, the big picture. Sorry, I said that backwards.
The more time you spend looking at the micro things, you lose sight of the
macro things.
Yes.
Yeah. If you're looking at too many details, then you start losing the big picture, and like you're worrying about how one snare drum hits and how that
right.
one snare drum sounds with the reverb, and you're losing track of the whole message of the track.
Right, exactly. And yeah, and then you kind of lose the context of it, where it's like, if you listen to the full song from like beginning to end, which hopefully people are doing,
right,
and not, micro sort of like picking it apart.
That's a huge thing, is like, myself included, I spent a lot of time looking at like one little detail, like looping something over and over, and no one is ever going to listen to it that much.
No.
Like that one moment,
right.
like that. Yeah, unless someone's transcribing it, which is an honor.
Yeah.
And you should be honored.
Going back to the point that you said about knowing what sound is going in versus what's coming out. So like, if you're using all these plugins and you're like experimenting with them, right? It's cool to experiment with them and like really sort of change the sound to something that you would never even thought of in the first place going in. But if it's something that is like supposed to mimic like a realistic piano and it has all like 9 plugins on it, which aren't doing anything, then it's probably not serving the purpose that you might think it is.
Right, yeah, that's a good point. And our ultimate recommendation is learn about EQ, compression, and reverb. Really, those 3 are the main effects that most mix engineers use the most, and they're really like how to get the sounds outside of like creative effects, of course. If you want to hear us talk about that and explain all these things, leave a comment. But there's tons of resources on YouTube and across the internet, so yeah, just check those things out. So the second thing is automating plugins.
Yes.
So if you're unfamiliar with the concept of automation, basically it's the act of changing things in real time. So for example, it could like the most typical automation is volume automation. And that comes from old analog consoles where you had the faders, which is where you were listening to. And basically automation would mechanically move those faders up and down depending on the parts of the song that you wanted. Back in the day, before they had that automation on the faders, there were people on the thing like bringing up and down the volume themselves. Like on the Beatles records, all 4 Beatles would be on the console because you only have so many fingers and there's a bunch of tracks. So the Beatles would be on the console, the mix engineer and the producer, and at their corresponding part, they would bring up and down their part. So it was like a performance. Automation is the automating of that. So telling your computer to do that by itself. And you can actually do that on effects.
For any like sort of, I guess, more like creative effect plugins like granular delays.
Shout out to Crystallizer by Sound Toys.
Yes, I use Crystallizer and everything.
Shout out to Sound Toys Bundle.
Yes.
We'll link that in the bio. Not sponsored, but we would like to be.
We love Sound Toys.
Anyway.
But yeah, so if you open up the automation window like how you would normally do, like if you wanted to automate volume, pan, stuff like that, you open it up and you'll see that literally all of the parameters are listed there. What you can do is you can add like the little nodes, like how you would like sort of on volume and pan. For most of them, you can do percentiles. So like 0 to 100%.
If you play guitar, think about it like grabbing a guitar pedal and going like in the middle of your song.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're doing, but you don't have to play it at the same time. You can just have it, and it just does it for you.
Exactly.
And you can like pre-plan it.
Yeah, and it adds like forward momentum to your songs and stuff, and it adds like a nice sort of like timbral sort of.
Yeah, like a timbral difference throughout the song.
Yeah, timbral difference and like
a forward change.
Yeah, like it grows, like a timbral growth, as opposed to like, oh, okay, this effect's on.
Right. And that actually brings us to our third tip, which is to keep the momentum of the song moving and keep the song pushing forward. Sean and I took a jazz arranging class in college, and one of the best pieces of advice that I think we got was don't sit and watch the paint dry. Which basically meant don't like kind of let the song just kind of meander by. Like make sure, is that even the right word?
Meander?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. But basically, like to make sure that you have forward momentum, and that can be a lot of things. In the arranging sense, like for instruments, it's change the line subtly throughout, or like have different instruments come in and out, which also applies to production. But one thing you can do is change textures. This is part of automation itself. But for example, like in the second chorus, bring the piano up an octave or down an octave. Or like make it half up, half down, maybe double it. So there's a lot of ways you can change that, but really just make sure that things are changing. And part of this is if you're using loops, just like change the loop or take off the loop or alter, manipulate the loop, but make sure that things are just constantly shifting throughout.
Yeah, and this could be done with 4-chord songs.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of just like interjection of like new characters.
Yeah.
In a story.
And I've talked about this in, I think, the last video we did, but there's a very boomer thing of being like, oh, this song has 4 chords, this sucks. But no, that's not the focal point. It's the production. It's how things are moving texturally like we're talking about now.
Okay, and literally every Lynyrd Skynyrd song is 4 chords.
Yeah, don't listen to boomers who bash 4-chord songs. Yeah, so just make sure that your songs are forward moving always and changing. And it could be like throughout a section something's changing, or it can be, which gives it this sort of like more through composed, but what I really mean is sort of like this journeying, this storytelling aspect. Because the lyrics often tell stories, but the instrumental parts can tell stories as well. And I think the best songs have both of them evolving at the same time.
Yeah, you can also like reflect the lyrics with the instrumental parts that you add too.
Right.
So if if like the lyrical content is somewhat shifting in emotion in a certain part of the song, you can add a different texture or different instrument there to sort of like complement the shift of tone.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the obvious, I forget, there's a term for it, but the obvious thing is like, for example, when a singer says stop and then the band cuts out.
Oh, yeah.
We also talked about that in this video over here, so check that out if you want to hear us talking about that, because Phoebe Bridgers did that in a song.
Not allegoric. No.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
If you know the word I'm talking about, leave it in the comment.
Yeah. There's this, yeah.
But anyway, so our fourth tip is to actually make your own instruments through sampling, which like seems like the crazy thing. Like, what? Create my own instrument? But it's not that bad actually. Like Sean and I do it with our phones. I mean, like ideally you should have a Zoom, like field recorder or something. But literally any sound that you hear, you can like sample, and then like for example in Logic, there's Quick Sampler, where you literally just drop it in and then trim to the region that you want to be sampled. Or like in there's one in Ableton. What's it called? I think it's actually just called Sampler or Simpler.
Simpler.
Yes. Yeah. It's super easy to just drop a sound in there, and usually it's in tune. Sometimes you have to tune it a little bit. For example, I have this little ocarina that I use and I sample, and I've used it a lot actually on different projects. And you have your own like MIDI instrument.
Right, yeah.
And like that's one way to kind of guarantee a unique sound. And like you could do stuff like something tapping on the table, for example, and use that as a drum. I even used, there's this guitar in the corner that I have that I used as a snare drum once, and that sounded cool.
Yeah.
With brushes. I didn't hit my guitar with sticks. Yeah, there's a lot you can do, and there's a lot of cool instruments that you can just gather by doing that. And just keeping an ear out when you're like not home. I mean, when you're at home too, but like, yeah, when you're walking down the street or when you're in your car and you hear a weird sound or whatever, you're at the zoo, you know?
Sounds everywhere, especially in urban landscapes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Also, shout out to Spitfire Labs because they are a bunch of free and amazing sounding plugins. Again, not sponsored, but not opposed to being sponsored by them. But Spitfire is great. I use them on most of my projects, and they're all free, and there's a ton of things. Soft piano is like a great like vibey piano sound, and they can actually sort of replace us.
Oh,
The
totally,
instruments
yeah.
that we play are available on Spitfire Labs.
Mm-hmm.
Not that salty about it.
No, because they sound good.
Yeah, they sound
So
good.
it's-
I mean, yeah, you have all the core instruments,
Right.
and it's just like, oh, what, you don't
Yeah.
need us anymore.
So yeah, download Spitfire Labs.
Download Spitfire Labs if you don't want to pay us.
They're always updating.
They are always updating, and they're free too.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Which is, yeah, crazy.
And then finally, the fifth and final tip is to not take
Not to take
not
from
from anyone.
Cut.
Okay, no, we have a real fifth tip.
Yes.
I mean that fifth tip, that tip is
That's tip 5.5.
that's a genuine tip. But anyway, the real tip 5 is don't be afraid to use the mute button. Don't be afraid to think things away. My philosophy is like just like kind of dump all your thoughts into a DAW. So record all the things that you potentially might use. When you feel like you're shaping up, that you're almost done, that you got all the ideas out, just start cutting and trimming and muting and just getting rid of all the excess that you don't need. And like, do it as an experiment. On my instrumental jazz album, plug. On my instrumental jazz album, I actually like messed up a part, and it was live. It was like a guitar part, and it was very clear because it was a very written part. And I was just like, okay, I'll just cut it out. How does it sound? And it sounded amazing. It was like suddenly a piano solo when it was not before.
Mm-hmm.
But because I did that, I was like, oh wow, this took on a new character, and it was like especially at the right moment too, and it gave this sort of like stop start, like I don't know, like movie drama momentum.
Right, yeah.
From just like cutting out my guitar part,
Mm-hmm.
which is hard because it's like my project and it's like, oh, I want to sound cool,
Right, yeah.
but like giving away control to the greater picture, I think.
Yeah, and it serves the music.
Yeah, totally.
A little bit better too. And I feel like especially with, DAWs and digital audio, it's like we have the ability now to add so much stuff
Oh yeah,
to one project
yeah,
that it's like we feel like we have to have like 30 tracks
yeah.
for something that probably needs
or-
like 3.
Closer to 100.
Yeah. 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 No, exactly. Yeah, we feel like we have to fill up all the space because it's available now. You don't always have to do that.
Anyway, those are our 5 tips to help you produce. If you want to work with us, click on the link down below. There should be videos somewhere on this screen popping up, so click on those videos. Thank you for watching.
Hello, people of the internet. This is Sean.
That's it.
Oh yeah,
It's over.
End of episode.